It is something we'll probably never see again, that kind of coincidence. Certainly a compelling discussion to have. Now, I'd like to shift a bit from your research in what can be classified, I suppose, as domestic policy and domestic discussion to foreign policy and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. You've written about the causes behind that invasion, the role that NATO played. Where do you see this going as the months and years here progress? And what do you see as the cause behind why all of this took place?
Well, I mean, I basically blame it on Russian aggression. It's tragic that number one, it's tragic that in 2014, when Russia invaded Crimea, that the world didn't react more strongly. There was a little bit of a let's look the other way phenomenon, and we let NATO and the United States as part of NATO really did not want a confrontation with Russia, and there was a sense that this is going to be it. Um, that's not going to go farther than this. Um, but of course, a number of years later, and again, this, interesting, the theme here goes back to you allow you allow someone or some country to get away with crimes, whether domestic or international, with impunity, and you don't punish those crimes, and you allow it to continue, and lo and behold, it gets worse the next time. And so, we're coming up on the 1 year anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia this time, an act that violated all, um, the law of armed conflict, international relations, the sovereignty of Ukraine, um, and just rode roughshod over those sacrosanct principles in international law, and then fought in a way that many people have characterized as war crimes. And President Biden um, has called the Russian Federation war out for engaging in war crimes, and has called Vladimir Putin a war criminal. So, um, I think there's good reason to think that. What the long game will be is very difficult to say. The US and NATO have been walking a fine line, of course, of trying to give as much support to Ukraine as possible without becoming uh, what is called co-belligerence, namely, without itself becoming a fighter directly engaged in conflict. So the US has given billions of dollars of aid and weapons and intelligence support. That intelligence support probably does cross the line into co-belligerency at the very least. Um, and some of the aid packages and the magnitude of the weaponry that's being sent may do that as well. But so far, we have managed to hold the line so that the conflict is contained. It is still between Russia and Ukraine. There is a pretty significant risk that third parties will be drawn in. Belarus, of course, which is a staging ground for Russian aggression and Russian action, has already been drawn in. But you could think of that as just sort of an extension of the Russian Federation. Um, there will have, the conflict will have to end with a negotiation one way or another. And so the question is, how does that negotiation come about? What are the conditions of negotiation? Um, what would bring Russia to the table in a serious way? And of course, the huge question is, how great of a risk is there that Russia will use a nuclear weapon if it feels itself badly enough cornered under present circumstances?
Do you see a nuclear risk that is significant in this conflict?
Well, that's a great question to ask. And in fact, I have convened a working group at my Center for Ethics and the Rule of Law at the University of Pennsylvania, to study that very question. We have had one meeting of the working group, and we'll be having more, though I'm not prepared to announce results yet of those meetings. I think the consensus among experts is that while the risk has grown considerably since the start of the conflict in Ukraine, that there's still quite a low chance that there would be use of a nuclear weapon. We can't rule it out. And if you have a very low probability event, even if that probability doubles or triples, it might still be a pretty low probability event, which is probably what it is. But still, the increase itself in risk to the world, because it would be a world, a globally cataclysmic event were there to be any use of a nuclear weapon there or anywhere else on the globe. The risk is not one that we ought to tolerate. And so the question is what can be done to try to bring that risk down as far as possible.